Hello and welcome to this video on looping. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the looping functionality in Ansible. There's a multitude of options and power that this can bring to our playbook creation. All of these start with underscore, and we're going to look at items, dict, sub, elements, together, sequence. There's many other options, and we're also going to have a look at random choice. Finally, we'll take a look at until. Looping is a powerful concept in Ansible, and in some of our previous examples, we could have benefited from looping. But in the interest of covering content in a systematic way, we've held off on loops until now. Let's take a look back at some of our examples and see where we could use them with loops. Let's go to revision 1. In this chapter, if we bring up the MOTD playbook, this was an earlier reference. Technically, we can revamp this by getting rid of the separate vars and using Ansible underscore distribution direct in the content. If we go into revision 2, we can see that these changes have been applied. Okay, so that looks a lot better, and if we run this, it still works as expected. For experimentation purposes, let's see how we can enhance this with the use of loops. Step into revision 3. And you can see that we've simplified this using the with underscore items. We have a list comprising of CentOS and Ubuntu. We're also using this with the when condition so that it only applies when it actually matches the Ansible underscore distribution. Let's run this. We just scroll back up slightly. Because of the loop, we run this task 12 times, 2 times for each of our Linux hosts. When using with underscore items, we can also pass in a list using the dash notation. So for example, here we have with underscore items dash CentOS and dash Ubuntu. And if we run this, we'll get the same output as we did on the previous attempt. Personally, I like the readability of this approach, and if I was actually picking of the two, this would be the standard I would apply. In revision 5, we have a new playbook. The with items is very useful when we have tasks where we need to perform the same action for a variety of users. For example, creating users. You can see in this example, I've got my wife Hayley, I've got my 2 daughters Lily and Anwen, and here we're using the user module which will allow us to add Unix accounts to our systems. Okay, great, so that's worked, and if we just have a look on one of our target systems, you can see there that these users have been added to the system, but we don't have comments for the actual names here, so let's have a look at some of the other options that we have with loops. In revision 6, let's remove these users. Quite simply, we've changed the state to absent. Okay, so that's our users removed. Step into revision 7. And in this example, you can see we have the with_dict and we have multiple dictionaries signified by the value with colon. Then, indented, we have our keys and values. Each time, the dict will be passed into the task as an item. And here we're using the dot notation to access each item. Let's see how this plays out. Okay, and if we take a look again, that's looking a lot better now. We've actually got the first name and the surname in the comments section. In the previous example, given that we all share the same surname, there was a lot of information that was repeated. If there were more users, we might want to think about that in another way. The with_subelements context is useful here. Again, let's quickly remove these users by changing the state to absent in this revision. And step into revision 9. And here we're using the with_subelements. This expects a list, the first item in the list being the content that is being passed in. This can either be a dictionary with a dictionary, or we can pass a list of dictionaries. For now, we'll treat this direct as a dictionary with a dictionary. The second element is the lookup key to reference. In this case, members. Item.0 refers to the main pass of the content and its dictionary. So we're capturing the surname from here. The next iteration of the loop is what's inside members. So we'll be doing this for each member inside. As the comment should have a name with an uppercase first character, let's use the Ginger2 template of title to achieve this. And if we check again, there we still have our users. Go into revision 10. The nice thing with this approach versus the previous one before is that we can easily expand it for more users. Recall that I mentioned the with_subelements can accept a list of dictionaries. We can remove the family key and add each family as a dictionary in the list. I'm also adding some others here, so my niece Freya, Anna Jalba, who was the technical reviewer for the first edition of the course, and also Abhishek and Sarah, again, who helped me with the first edition. If we try this out, we can see that it's added the new users and the original users already existed. If we check the password file, we have all of our users. There's something worth noting at the moment. None of our users have a password set. We can verify this by taking a quick look at the etc shadow file on one of our hosts. The double exclamation marks here are indicative of this, and whilst I recommend opt-in for security measures like SSH keys over passwords, things can sometimes not work as we expect. without the user having a password set. So, let's address this with some throwaway passwords. Step into revision 11. And here we're using the password entry to the user module, and in turn we're using the lookup functionality to set a password. All of this is built into Ansible. We don't wish to save the password, so we're specifying /dev/null, which in Unix appears like a file but is a special device that discards anything that is written to it. We're asking for a password of 15 characters with a mixture of ASCII digits, hex digits, and punctuation. So, pretty secure. And then we're passing it using a Ginger2 filter to password_hash as an SHA 512. This is the requirement for this module. As I say, we're just accepting these values as we're not going to use these accounts with password. So, let's run this. And now if we check again, you'll have different values to me as it's random, but you'll see there's a reference now where the exclamation mark previously was. Now that we have our users with password set, let's look at how we can use some other types of loops for configuration purposes. If you ever create a user on Windows or Mac, you'll often get some common directories by default. Let's do this step. Go into revision 12. And we're going to create some common user directories. Nested loops are handy for this. The with_nested essentially means for each of these, do each of these. We've got 8 users here and 3 directories, so this will result in 24 iterations of this being run. In this case, item.0 refers to the name and item.1 is the nested item. Let's run this. Okay, great. This can take a little while, so for the purposes of the video, I sped this up. If we take a look at one of our users, you can see there I've got a photos, movies, and documents folder. Step into revision 13. Suppose we wanted a loop with sets of data. For that, we can use the with_together loop for this. Let's structure our playbook so we create directories of relevance for each user. So there we've got our pairs, we've got James with tech, we've got Haley with psychology, Freya with acting and Lily with dancing. Anwen's quite young at the moment, so that's just playing. Anna with Japanese, Abhishek with coffee, and Sarah with music. Let's give that a try. Okay, great, so that's done. And again, if we check my user, you can actually see there that I've got a tech directory at the bottom. And if we pick another one here, I'm going to pick Freya. You can see there that she's got acting. Step into revision 14. And in this revision, our playbook is called SSH_key_playbook. And within this, we're experimenting with the with_file loop, which allows us to use file content in loops. Here we're using the authorized_keys module, which essentially adds SSH keys. We're going to add our current user's public key to a user's authorized keys file. In this case, I'm using my account of James. The with_file module means that it's going to take the content of this file and pass it as the variable item. We will use it as a key here. Okay, great. So that's added the public key of the Ansible user to the user account of James. And if we try this out, I should technically now be able to SSH into another system as the James user. Perfect. Step into revision 15. This example could be used with multiple keys. Let's create another key. And we'll just accept the defaults there. And if we take a look at the playbook, you can actually see there that we're using the underscore file with the list notation. And we've actually got a new reference at the bottom there for custom_key.pub. Let's run this playbook. The initial key already existed, hence the green output, and the yellow for the change keys. Now we can also connect in with our custom key. There we go. Stepping into revision 16. And our playbook example in this case is directory_sequence. Ansible has a with_sequence loop that can be useful in certain circumstances. It is worth noting that this one, at the time of writing, has to be used as key value entries. Here, I'm using this to create directories of 0 to 100 with skip intervals of 10. Okay, great, that's done. And if we have a look at one of our user accounts, it's created those directories. It's actually done those as root, as we're actually running as the root user. This is only testing, but if you're actually doing something similar to this, you would need to have this as a consideration. If you go into revision 17, it's also possible to use formatting as we would with printf statements. In this example, it's working through the values and treating them as decimals, which in our case is the same as what we had in the previous example, therefore resulting in a green output. Excellent. The beauty of this approach is that it can be used with decimal, hex, or octal. If we move into revision 18, and in this revision we have a playbook called hex directory sequence. And in this revision, if you bring up the following playbook, you can see that the %d has changed to %x, and we're stepping through from 0 to 16 to show the hex values on output. Okay, great. So that's actually created quite a lot of hex underscore sequences. Step into revision 19. And in this example, if you cat the following file, and on this one, we're telling it to count from 1 to 5 and to then use that with the with underscore sequence to create the directories. Let's take a look at how this looks from the user's home directory. Okay, so we've got our sequences. We've got our hex sequence and we've got our count sequence. And what we're going to do here is create a random directory based on one of those choices between Google, Facebook, Microsoft, or Apple. And as we can see there, Facebook seemed to have done quite well on that one. The last part we will cover before we move on is the use of until. Until is an exceptionally useful loop and is one of my favourites. Step into revision 21. In this directory, we've got a simple script that will issue a random number. If we run this, you can see in this example it's giving me the number 3. We're going to run the script until we hit 10 on each host. We're going to give it 100 attempts on each. You can see there that we're specifying the script to run. We are registering the output of this in result. We're giving it 100 retries. And we're going to keep doing this until within the actual standard out, we can see the output of 10. By default, the standard delay on this is 5 seconds. We're actually overriding this to 1 second. If we run this, okay, so it's been successful for CentOS 1, CentOS 3, and CentOS 2. And Ubuntu 1. So we've got Ubuntu 2 and 3 to go. There's Ubuntu 3. And there's Ubuntu 2. There's a variety of loop options built into Ansible, and here we've covered a lot of them. I suggest you take a look at the Ansible documentation and devote some time investigating other types of loops. I hope you've enjoyed the various ways of leveraging loops. In the next video, we'll be looking at the performance and speed aspects in asynchronous, serial, and parallel.